India. Extreme economic growth on one side, extreme poverty on the other. It's one of the fastest developing countries in the world and one of the most impacted by the climate crisis. The largest population in the world is taking the polls for elections. Still, the environmental crisis is not playing a big role in the country's politics. So, why is that? Anuj Dayal proudly shows off the solar panels on the roof of Delhi's metro. Green power supply in urban transportation, Delhi Metro is one of the green flagship projects of the city's energy and transportation transition. The solar panels are not only installed on roofs, but also on the trains themselves.
Delhi Metro's philosophy is very clear. We want to generate as much non-conventional energy. Apart from the whatever is supplied by the grid, we want to generate a lot of energy through solar sources.
Around a third of the metro's electricity already comes from solar energy. This share is set to grow to 50% within the next decade. But this is just one small building block in India's plan to become an international powerhouse for green energy. With mega projects such as the Badla Solar Park covering 56 square kilometers in the desert of Rajasthan in northern India, the country aims to triple its renewables by 2030. India's renewable energy capacity has multiplied in the past years. Its share in the energy mix is almost equal to that of the US today. China clearly outperforms both. Thousands of kilometers of new railroad lines, new metro networks, roads, ports, new factories, new shopping centers. Symbols of India's enormous growth, growing prosperity and new self-confidence in recent years. As the boom goes on, so too does the hunger for more and more energy.
The peak year in German electricity production was 2017 or 18. It's peaked. So you're producing less electricity in the last years in Germany. In India, we're producing 8% more than the previous year, and that's on year average. In the summer peak months, right, it goes up to 10, 11%. So we need a lot more electricity. We need a lot more electricity.
Renewables are only one side of the coin. India is pushing in all directions, also into the dirty ones. Coal production is on the rise in India today, while industrialized nations like the US and the European Union are closing down plants of the fossil fuel. Coal's share in India's energy mix is almost 80%.
Coal is still the cheapest source of electricity in India. And India continues to build coal mines because one of the things people don't want is electricity shortages. One reason the Prime Minister is so popular is that he's actually delivered on basic infrastructure. A lot of part of India historically used to have what we call power cuts, load shedding. They would not get reliable electricity 24/7. Now, things have improved dramatically. And people have the gadgets, they have the purchasing power to buy a refrigerator and so on and so forth, and they want electricity to use them.
Most Indians still face power cuts on a daily basis. However, massive electrification and infrastructure projects and India's rise to world power scores him points among voters. Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Experts predict that he's likely to win a majority in parliament and run for a third term.
पिछली शताब्दी की गलतियों को सुधारने के लिए हमारे पास
We don't have much time to correct the mistakes of the last century. A small part of the human race has exploited nature indiscriminately, but the whole of humanity is paying the price, especially the inhabitants of the global south.
विशेषकर ग्लोबल साउथ के निवासियों को
Despite Modi's striking words at last year's climate conference, fighting climate change does not play a big role in his party's election manifesto, say experts.
There's no political constituency. India is very, very focused on economic development. And that's what people want, that's what people reward. There's a massive push for new infrastructure. There's a growth in consumer durables and non-durables. India is projected to become the third largest market for Mercedes-Benz soon. So, it's amongst the fastest growing economies in the world. It's already the fifth largest economy, and it has an ambition to become the third largest in a couple of years, a $5 trillion economy. So there is a huge excitement across political parties, across different sections about economic growth.
India is the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. One factor, its huge population of 1.4 billion people. Per capita, carbon emissions still do not meet those of industrialized countries. Still, by being one of the most impacted by the climate crisis globally, India's addiction to coal to fuel the economy and court voters' favor is taking a toll. With more frequent heat waves like those happening in April this year in Bangalore, scientists estimate it is leading to more than 1,000 deaths annually all over the country. Around 170 people died in last June alone due to extreme heat, and there are other impacts. Back then, even fast food companies temporarily stopped using tomatoes as drought and flooding destroyed farmers' harvests.
They're seeing how that's impacting their crop yield, their productivity, and thereby their livelihoods. If you look at the example of coastal fishing communities who are seeing sea level rise firsthand, they have kind of a front row view into that kind of slow burn climate impact.
The destruction of natural resources, the expanding water crisis, and the change in weather patterns is hitting large parts of the society. It's not only the main party's programs that are lacking a clear climate agenda to tackle this. A strong pan-Indian climate movement or Green Party is still absent in the country.
A movement like that would have to transcend multiple barriers of geographic differentiation, caste barriers, income barriers, differing education levels, and that kind of coordinated climate movement is still something that is evolving and doesn't necessarily exist right now the way that it does maybe in Europe.
Modi's rule has also been marked by his Hinduist national cause, higher unemployment, attacks against minorities, arrests of opposition leaders, and a shrinking space for independent media. Civil society also faces oppression, including climate activists Friday for Future here at the demonstration in New Delhi. Disha Ravi, the face of the youth organization in India, was arrested in 2021. For a while, she wasn't allowed to leave the country. India's goal is to become climate neutral by 2070, not ambitious enough to fit with global climate targets to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, according to the NGO Climate Action Tracker.
India is one of the climate swing states. We have to get India right to get emissions and to be able to really combat climate change. I think there is just no question about that.
Contributing 7% of the world's greenhouse gases, India's role in climate protection is becoming more and more important. To adapt to the climate crisis and get on track to the 1.5 target, India would need green investments of the size not far from its entire annual budget.
The credit rating agencies have a role to play. And then definitely the multilateral development banks and bilateral institutions from Western countries have a very key role to play in reducing those risks for that capital to be able to go. So I think those are the key actors that are involved in creating the ecosystem for more capital, private, concessional, and grant money to be able to go to emerging developing economies and India.
Despite massive green growth, experts don't predict that India's next government will raise climate ambitions, unless easier access to credit, investment from abroad, and support from richer countries sweeten this step.